I'm on site.
Next story I want to talk about is okay. This one is quite a hectic one. And just knowing YouTube, I know they do not like stories that involve R word and deep things like that. But this was a development that I definitely had to speak about, and it's something that a lot of people need to be aware of because it just speaks to a story about society and really what is what and what is what. So anyway, there's been a new development in the law field. The Supreme Court of Appeal has upheld the National Prosecuting Authority's appeal that foreplay pretty much consents to sex. Mm. Okay, so we got an article here by the Captured News 24, and we are going to read what it says, what it's actually says. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I read you, CSA upholds appeal and NPA's appeal of ruling that foreplay implies tacit consent to sex. Okay. Okay, hold on. Can I just make this bigger because I can't see? Pause. All right, perfect. Perfecto. All right, let's go. A man who was acquitted of R-wording his girlfriend had his conviction reinstated after the Supreme Court of Appeal on Wednesday upheld the National Prosecuting Authority's appeal. Okay, so this man's name is Loiso Koko, was convicted of R-word in the Makanda Regional Court in September 2020 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Yikes. Okay, so accused of R-word, tried, found guilty, sentenced to 7 years. Okay, that's where we're starting. He challenged the judgment in the Eastern Cape High Court in Makanda in October 2020. So you guys know if you have a trial and you're convicted and you found guilty and you're convicted and you sentenced, obviously you can still appeal. That's why we have the if you're in a lower court, if you're in a high court, you can appeal to the CSA, the Supreme Court of Appeals. That's where you go to appeal anything. And then depending on what happens there, say for example, if you lose there, you can even appeal further to the constitutional court. And then if you lose there, it's chai. There's nothing more you can do. But if you win at the constitutional court, that will be the verdict and will be the one that stands. But if you win at the Court of Appeals, the other person or the other party, whatever, they can still also take it to the Constitutional Court. So you can end up also losing. You can win at the appeals and you can lose at the Constitutional Court, and then it's cha. So anyway, not to confuse things too much. So yeah, alleged to have R-worded his girlfriend, and he was accused of R-word. He was sentenced. He was trialed. He was convicted. He was sentenced 7 years. Okay, let's move on. And then he appealed the decision to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Okay, now we know where we are. Let's move on. It was the state's case that Coco and his then girlfriend had agreed prior to the alleged R-word that they could have oral sex. Okay. Coco's accuser had, however, expressly and repeatedly told him that she did not want to have penetrative sex because she was still a virgin. Okay. And they were both 23 at the time. Okay. Interesting. Let's continue. In its ruling on Wednesday, the CSA said that had it allowed the In its ruling on Wednesday, the CSA said that had it allowed the High Court ruling to prevail, it would not only be a pervasive incentive to unscrupulous persons taking advantage of their victims, but also have the effect of frustrating the speedy realization of the constitutional objective of gender equality. Okay, interesting. In addition, this would also entrench patriarchal attitudes, stereotypes, and mindsets that rights of women and children, in particular, to their dignity and physical integrity, count for little and can therefore be gratuitously violated with impunity. Okay. The regional court, which initially heard the matter, ruled that even though his then girlfriend had consented to foreplay and watched Coco take off his clothes, it did not equate to consent to vaginal penetrative sex. Okay. When it came before the High Court, then the acting judge was Tembeka, and the judge Mnyeko overturned the regional court's conviction on the basis that Coco's then girlfriend did not object when he undressed her and took off his clothes, making her an equally active participant. Whoa. Okay. Getting a bit lost. Okay, let's continue. The High Court found that his partner's consent to foreplay could have led to Coco to assume that she had consented. Okay, so they're pretty much saying, the High Court's pretty much saying, because um she watched him undress and she watched him undress her, that would implied, consent, that they were wanting to do the deed. Okay, interesting. Let's continue. In these circumstances, I cannot uphold the magistrate's findings of fact which are unjustified when one has regard to record. I cannot hold that the state proved that the version of the appellant that he genuinely believed there was at least tacit consent was false beyond reasonable doubt. Okay. However, counsel for the state and the Women's Legal Center Trust, a friend of the court, argued before the CSA that Cook intentionally penetrated his then girlfriend, despite her on several occasions making it clear she wanted to preserve her virginity. Okay. It included her initial refusal when Coco tried to undress her. Oh. Initial refusal. Okay. So I mean, if she refused initially, then what's happening then? As well as the reiteration that she did not want to have sex, to which Coco assured he would not penetrate her. Okay. When she agreed with the understanding that he would not penetrate her, Coco raped her. Ooh, gosh. Repeatedly, even after she told him he was hurting her. Oh, jeez. Okay. The counsel further cited to Coco's testimony that when asked what informed his assumption that she had consented to sex, he said she did not resist oral sex. Oh my God. So the nigga said because he got hit, that was like, oh, maybe she's trying to, which is not the case. Wow. Okay. Let's continue. The CSA ruled that the High Court erred in its judgment in which it equated consent to oral sex with penetrative consent. Okay. So what happened was, now I understand the story. Okay. So he was accused of R-wording his girlfriend. All right. He was charged of R-word. Was taken to trial. His defense was that she had consented to oral sex and she consented to us undressing and all of that. So he took that as consent to them sleeping together, having sex. And then, so the High Court, which was in the Eastern Cape, then was like, okay, yes, she did watch them get undressed and she did consent to oral sex. So, okay, cool. I guess that's tacit consent. I guess she was involved in. It's not really rape. Okay. And then now the Women's League, Women's Society, then hears about the story and they appeal it. So they appeal it to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals is like, no, the High Court was incorrect to assume that consent to oral sex is the same to consented to penetrative sex. Okay, so now we know where we are. All right, now I understand. Let's finish up. The complaint must communicate consent to penetrative sex to the accused. Consent to foreplay does not constitute consent to an act of penetration. Okay, the respondent squarely relied on and equated the complainant's consent to foreplay and oral sex as constitution to consent to penetrative sex. This notwithstanding his firm assurance that no penetrative sex would take place when T.S. visits him at his apartment. Okay. The Court of Appeals found that the High Court committed an error of law and set aside its ruling. Okay. So the High Court had ruled him free. The Court of Appeals was like, no, them niggas was wrong. You were wrong. You're going to jail. Okay. The Court of Appeals ordered the Director of Public Prosecutions in the Eastern Cape to prioritize the appeal against the sentence. Okay. Should the respondent fail to prosecute the appeal against the sentence within 20 days of the order, he shall forfeit the Okay. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty much the story. Jeez, it was a rough story. I even got lost each and every way. But yeah, I think as I was saying, this story really speaks to society that remember, like, I don't know if you guys watch Big Brother. I don't either. But there was I don't know. There was a contestant on Big Brother who was saying that he's never heard the word consent. He doesn't know what consent means, what it is, because it's from the guys, a type vibe. So I think this just really speaks to society and like just people in general, not just only niggas, but obviously majority niggas need to fucking understand the concept of consent, getting consent, and and in this day and age, you gotta pretty much get the entire consent. You gotta you gotta consent to everything. Like, must you consent to the entire journey of what you guys are gonna do? You know what I mean? If she says she's just trying to kiss, all of that hand stuff, then that's where you gotta leave it. If you're trying to go further, you gotta get consent for that too. And if you don't, then sorry for you, but you can't really assume that one consent means consent to this and consent to that and consent to that and consent to that. I mean, if you think about it, it's logical. It makes sense. If a girl consents to having sex with you, and then you steal her phone, and then you said, "Oh, but she consented to us having." It's like, no, she consented to you guys having sex, but she didn't consent to you stealing her phone. It's the same thing. If a girl consents to you guys having oral sex, and then you have sex with her, it's like, bro, she didn't consent to you guys having sex. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, that's the story. That was the case. Pretty deep. But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on. Let's. Whoa, 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 whoa.